Each year, the senior colloquium votes on a person to speak at commencement. It is an invitation of honor, as this person represents someone that has served to inspire the students. To introduce our invited commencement speaker is senior Chloe Evans.
I'm very honored to welcome Professor Sam Bullington as this year's commencement speaker. Professor Sam Bullington has received degrees in environmental studies and anthropology, as well as his PhD in feminist studies from the University of Minnesota. While his research focuses broadly on sexual politics and nation building in post-apartheid South Africa, he has worked closely with South African queer and AIDS activists studying the nation's sexual orientation clause, as well as access to antiretroviral drugs for HIV-positive people living in poverty. Recently, he's been involved with the first trans organization in Africa, plans to start a trans choir in South Africa, and has been working on a book about what he has learned from his own gender transition. Here at CU, he has taught amazing courses that many of us graduates have had the pleasure of taking, including Intro to LGBT Studies, Global Sexualities and Public Health, Queer Theory, Sexual Spaces, Masculinities, and many more. Aside from Professor Bullington's amazing academic and professional accomplishments, he serves as an outstanding professor and role model in our community. His compassion turns even the most complex theories into relatable and understandable concepts, and his classes encourage all students to not only educate themselves on important issues, but to become a part of them and change how they see the world. Professor Bullington's willingness to share stories from his own journey create a unique classroom, one where everyone feels like part of a family, working towards something larger than themselves. His calm but passionate demeanor transforms a Tuesday afternoon class into a stage for discovery, radical activism, and connection building. His honesty, compassion, and commitment to such serious activist issues has honestly created a Sam Bullington fan club, especially in the senior colloquium. So it's only fitting that he takes over teaching it next spring. He is our go-to person anytime the Gender Justice League or the Senior Colloquium needs to create a panel, talk general feminism, or hear innovative new ideas. His willingness to be involved and interviewed in our colloquium project, Feminists of the Front Range, provided a refreshing perspective on how we define feminism. Thank you for your tremendous impact during our academic and feminist journeys. Speaking for myself and the other graduates, I am confident that we could not have picked a more inspiring or passionate speaker to send us off into our futures. Please help me in welcoming to the podium Professor Sam Bullington.
No pressure, my goodness. I don't know how on earth I'm going to live up to that. And after the amazing student speakers, I thought the faculty speaker was going first so that it wouldn't look poorly after the student speakers. It is such a pleasure to share this day with you, and truly, truly an honor to have been chosen by the students to speak today. It just really means so much to me. Graduation is, something of a performance for parents, for administration, for one another, and since, the students who especially have asked me to share some encouraging words with them today, then I'm going to speak primarily to them from the heart and share with you all what I wish that someone had told me at my own college graduation. So, the standard narrative of graduation is, today is a day of celebration, a pinnacle of achievement, a moment of relief, a time to acknowledge all of your hard work, your growth, your mastery. You've survived at least 4 years of nonstop challenges and have emerged victorious. You're a success. But today is also a day of sadness as you reminisce about your memories of this place. Say goodbye to friends with whom you're accustomed to sharing your everyday life, and bring to a close this chapter of your life that has likely been one of the most significant periods of your entire existence. And today is also a day of anxiety and even terror as you begin to move from this validation of success into whatever's next, the great unknown. And every graduation in life, scholarly or not, represents both an ending and a beginning. A movement from the comfort of mastery to the vulnerable place of starting anew as a beginner. But the gift of any liminal period, when you are between what has been and what will be, is that it offers time and space for reflection. In this instance, contemplation of who you are and who you wish to become, how you understand success, and what constitutes a meaningful life. In my consideration of these questions, one external reference point has been particularly salient and inspiring, and that is the life and work of Audre Lorde, and in particular her piece, Uses of Erotic, The Erotic as Power. I first read this piece in my first women's studies class in college, and 6 months rarely passes in my life without me consulting that text for comfort, for guidance, and for wisdom. Even when I had a joining ceremony with my partner and we chose out readings for our ceremony, then I actually chose a reading from that particular piece. In it, she refers to the internal requirement toward excellence. But this excellence is not necessarily the same kind of excellence generally celebrated on college campuses. Grades and academic awards, sporting victories, college rankings. Instead, she explains that excellence is not a question only of what we do, but a question of how acutely and fully that we can feel in the doing. In other words, our degree of presence and of passion. And she says once we know the extent to which we are capable of feeling that sense of satisfaction and completion, we then observe which of our various life endeavors bring us closest to that fullness. She calls this a grave responsibility. You can see why. Not to settle for the convenient, the shoddy, the conventionally expected, nor the merely safe. As you leave college, you'll be bombarded with expectations and advice from well-meaning relatives, teachers, and friends, media, all trying to tell you who you should be, what you should care about, what success and happiness should look like. But all that really matters is what is meaningful to you, listening to the urging of your own heart. Although it may sound cliche to do what you love and the rest will follow, your own inner compass truly will be your strongest guide throughout life. For most of you, this is how you found women's and gender studies. Not because it was a good career move, or because your friends thought it was cool, or because the media said it was sexy. You chose women's and gender studies because you genuinely felt passionate about it, and maybe even faced serious consequences for making that choice. So you have already embarked on the path recommended by Lorde, the path away from what keeps us docile, loyal, and obedient, externally defined, and accepting of many facets of oppression. But it can be tempting when leaving college, a place where idealism and self-exploration are frequently encouraged, to think, okay, now I have to join the real world, and slowly let go of those things that set your heart on fire, that resonate with your own sense of integrity, in order to find your place in a system that, as Audre Lorde reminds us, defines good in terms of profit and conformity, rather than in terms of human well-being. Though it will be tempting to take the highest paying job, the most conventionally attractive spouse, the highest ranking grad school, the opportunities that look great on paper, I promise you that what will be most rewarding and satisfying is to choose those things that are the best match for you, regardless of how they look on paper. This is where you will find your joy, something that no amount of money or popularity or worldly success or material comfort can provide. For many of you, this will mean creating your own path in life, because the path you will be looking for simply does not exist. I know for myself, I had my first midlife crisis when I graduated from college. I looked out in the world to find my place, and much like my experience of gender, I found that none of the available options suited me. Most of you, I hope, will be looking to create genuine change in the world, rather than, as Audre Lorde says, merely settling for a shift of characters in the same weary drama. I've probably already found that the current power structure is not particularly welcoming of change. So I'd like to speak for a few minutes about the skills required to create change and to forge your own path in life. Although most of your professors, including myself, have probably highlighted skills needed to be successful students, such as clear writing, critical thinking, sound development of an argument, I would like to bring your attention to another set of skills required in the learning process that may be even more necessary for your life beyond college. Learning is an inherently vulnerable process. Basically, in order to learn something new, we have to admit that we don't know it already. So to embark on a learning journey right from the start requires a lot of courage. In order to test our newfound learning, we have to be willing to take a risk, whether that be raising our hand in class or submitting a paper, which requires us to be both humble and secure enough to open ourselves up to criticism and to feedback. And the entire process demands that we be patient and compassionate with both ourselves and others as we are figuring it all out. Creating something new in the world is also an inherently vulnerable process, one that requires a lot of courage right from the start, willingness to take risks, patience and compassion for our own blunders and the ignorance of others, and the right balance of humility and self-assuredness to follow our own vision and sense of integrity. I'm living a life that by conventional standards really shouldn't be possible. When I was growing up, I'd never heard of anyone like me. And although as a transsexual there are many ways that my entire life has been defined by gender, in other ways I've been living a life basically outside of gender in a lot of ways, disregarding societal expectations, not only for what it means to be a man or a woman, but even what it means to be a transsexual. In addition to what it means to be a professor, what it means to be a spouse, as many of you know who have taken my classes. Our human experience seems to pull us in two seemingly divergent directions. As spiritual essence organized into human forms, we are each completely unique. It is our deepest calling to express our uniqueness. That is our very reason for being born. And yet we have a fundamental deep human need to belong. In each of our human communities, from our families, to our workplaces, to our friend circles, to our nations, including activist communities, have rules for membership, both spoken and unspoken. And although different communities may have greater or lesser tolerance for divergence from those community norms, our acceptance in these groups is fundamentally predicated on meeting such expectations, as well as demonstrating our loyalty to the group, showing that you are one of us. In exchange, we are given the benefits and protection of membership, which are many. So it is our human quandary that we are all called to evolve and to individuate. But such individuation takes us away from the comforts of being just like everyone else. Our uniqueness is our greatest strength and the foundation of our purpose for being here. And yet it is also our Achilles heel, our deepest human vulnerability. Because in order to stand in our uniqueness, we must come away from the crowd, kind of the essence of the coming out experience. And we all remember the great and painful lesson of adolescence, that it's dangerous to be different. So as a transsexual, my journey to my authentic self has been more visible and obvious than most, because it required physical changes to my body that were hard to ignore. But in no way is my journey extraordinary. In fact, it is the most universal of stories, because we are all hungering to connect to our authentic selves, to our own sense of integrity. We're all living in a culture that tells us that our material survival requires abandoning our integrity, and that continually directs our attention to our external environment and away from ourselves and what's going on inside, where, as Audre Lorde reminds us, our true power resides. And we are all flailing around without much guidance or role modeling about how to access and listen to that inner knowing, and all doing that largely unconscious anxiety dance of how much of myself can I reveal, and how much of my truth am I willing to give up in order to be accepted. So individuation demands leaving behind what we have known, and frequently those on whom we have come to depend for a sense of camaraderie and support. This is a lot to ask, so generally we must have a strong inner call, or be deeply suffering, to be willing to withstand such potential loss, because we all want to belong. I waited over 10 years to go on hormones because I knew it would be very disruptive of the life that I had created for myself. Not my ideal life, but a life that was quite manageable and familiar. I waited for over 10 years to go on hormones because I was afraid of losing the acceptance and support of communities that had been my lifeline. And my fears did prove to be true, I won't lie. Going on hormones, as well as speaking my truth as a professor, was fundamentally disruptive, changing my relationship to the human community in most every possible way, resulting in both professional and personal consequences that at times were extraordinarily painful. including the loss of communities that have been dear to me. However, embracing my unique path has brought a multitude of unspeakable joys, including finding new communities of support, and it has been an incredible adventure of learning about myself and experiencing life in new ways that has been rewarding and satisfying beyond my wildest dreams. We live in precarious times, as you've learned in all of your Women's and Gender Studies courses. We have created an unstable human community whereby the majority are dehumanized and burdened with unbearable suffering, while a tiny percentage of its members are swollen with greed and an inflated sense of self-importance, bringing our entire planet to the verge of collapse. Our primary framework for power is power over, dominance, and control, and even our models for social justice are often based on militarized notions of winning. We are limited by dualistic thinking and imprisoned in social categories that do not reflect the lives we are already leading. What we are needing more than anything else is a paradigm shift. We cannot solve the problems we face with the same consciousness that created them. Or as our dear Lord would say, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. In this historical moment, we are being called away from the group mind. You are the ones that we have been waiting for. You are our hope for the future. Thank you sincerely to each one of you for existing, because your presence in the world has made it easier for me to breathe. There's been decades where I've been talking about the things I've been talking about with you, and people look at me blankly, or they get angry with me, and it's such a relief to talk about things and to have you all say, yes, I totally get what you're talking about. I will be growing old in the society that you all will create. You are the ones who will carry us forward into our new future. It will take us beyond where we are stuck. We are going beyond our mind's version of reality, a very exciting shift in our collective belief system, much like when humans learned that the Earth was in fact round. It's moving us beyond what we think is possible personally and collectively, which has been the essence of all great discoveries and contributions of the human community, from scientific and technological advancements to athletic feats to creative genius. We are going beyond our conditioning, beyond the limits of our parents, our teachers, our culture, into new territory. Since we are conditioned to fear and resist change, it is not comfortable being in the unknown, and in the US, we tend to regard comfort as an inalienable right. We reach for seemingly secure structures, both personally and collectively, to look for some sort of familiar reference point. That is why I believe we are currently witnessing so much frantic effort to shore up the old foundations, whether it's the resurgence of religious fundamentalism all over the world, the vehement defending of the crumbling institution of marriage, both from those opposing and those supporting same-sex marriage, or the desperate attempts to return the US economy to the way it was. In times of dramatic change, our panic drives us to turn back, to seek the old familiar ways, regardless of whether they are working. But as our Lord reminds us, when I dare to be powerful, to use my strength in the service of my vision, then it becomes less and less important whether I am afraid. So what is your vision? What is your gift? Your unique contribution? Nobody else sees the world exactly like you, and we need to hear your perspective. I know how scary it can be to name something that nobody else sees, but you are seeing it for a reason. And the path that you lay down will help those who come behind you to find their own way. Follow your sense of aliveness, whatever brings you joy. I know it's hard to listen to what's deep inside, but you deserve to listen. If you need it, I give you permission to live your life exactly in the way that makes sense to you. As John Kabat-Zinn says, regardless of how absurd our inner calling might seem, it is authentically ours, and it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else. I believe that success is simply honoring your unique life path. And happiness more often comes from taking a risk than from being comfortable. Although we are taught to seek the destination, whether that be the ideal job, the perfect relationship, financial security, societal acceptance, where we can just kick back and be comfortable, we are meant to always be expanding and evolving, seeking out new discoveries in ourselves and in our worlds, being transformed and surprised by life. We are meant to individuate, to move beyond where we have come from, to follow our own inner directives, to create our best, most exciting, most authentic lives. And I can't wait to see what you all create. Congratulations and my sincerest best wishes for your glorious futures.